Well, welcome back to the Energy Sovereignty Project and our closeout for the fourth week in March. We've had a really good run here, and for the last 2 weeks we've been driving on nothing but excess sunlight. I'm going to repeat that. I think it bears emphasizing that for the last 2 weeks the car has run on nothing but sunlight, and not just sunlight but extra sunlight that is over and above what it took to run the house. Now, that on its own is impressive enough, but when you factor in that we're not talking about a golf cart, we're talking about a 4-door 5-seat sedan with 600 horsepower. This just really is ushering in a new era, I think, and this happening so early in the year, in March, that I think it really does put to bed a lot of the arguments that we hear about electric vehicles being just as dirty as gasoline vehicles. And again, obviously they're pointing to the source of your electricity for that, but that's just a fallacy on so many levels, you know. And not the first of it that I haven't seen a clean diesel yet that can run on sunlight, but also the efficiencies of these vehicles. The efficiency of electric vehicles are just far and above that of gasoline or diesel vehicles. It's just a product of how they're made. So we won't make this too long here. We'll go ahead and get back to the studio and run some numbers. But we've got some cloudy days coming up, so it's going to be interesting to see how the first week in April turns out. But we'll run some numbers on this last week, and then we'll get March closed out a couple of days. So let's get back to the studio and see some of the numbers here. Well, welcome back to the studio while we go over our fourth week for March. What an amazing couple of weeks driving on sunlight. 3 weeks about. So as I'm tallying up the numbers here, I see that to date we've covered 451 miles on sunlight alone, and that's just this month. And then we add that up to the little test that we did in February. We're up to a little bit over 500 miles. And our total driving this year comes to 2,500 miles. And so pretty good. Only 3 months into the year, and already about a fifth of our total miles is on nothing but sunlight. So let's get to this and see how the end of March shakes out. So we'll pick it up where we left off on the 22nd. So there is the 22nd. A little rainy weather, production slightly lower than consumption. And then just a little refresh. We've got the notes for the 22nd. And again, as you see in the notes section, you know, we've decided to make use of the Tesla's large battery to be able to continue to drive without charging the car. And again, that's just one of those things to kind of stretch out our sunlight miles. At this time of year, we have that large capacity battery. We might as well use it. So going from 132 miles down to 87 miles in order to conserve as much power as possible there. And so then on the 23rd, did another 24 miles of driving. And this time we put 15 kilowatt hours to replenish some of the miles that we used. And there's a notes section. So as you look at the log information for the 23rd here, the you're seeing that this is how we decided to divide up the charge. And so after the total solar day was done, you're able to see how much the system has produced. And then so what I did was I looked at the average consumption of the home over the previous week and tallied up those days and averaged them out, basically doing the same thing that an AI would, and to try and figure out how much charge I should put into the car, given the average home usage, and hit it pretty close. As you can see from the from that log, we, with the 15 kilowatt hours added to the 23.4 that the home did, we used almost exactly what we produced, and that was what our goal was. And so here's the notes section for that. Vehicle took in 15 kilowatt hours, and here's the rest of the vehicle information. And so far the system's holding its own and recovering slightly, but there's an issue on the horizon. And so here's the forecast. And so yeah, you can see that that's a little bit of a problem. And so we're expected to have quite a few rainy days coming up. When you get into those low to high 80% cloud cover numbers, then you can expect that that's generally going to be a bit of a problem. It usually produces 15 to 30 kilowatt hours thereabouts, but it's very unpredictable. A lot of that depends on when the cloud cover rolls in during the day. But sometimes you do okay, and other times it just really wrecks you. So it's just simply one of those things that happens this time of year. And so then as we bring up the data for the 24th here, you'll see what I'm trying to do is to maintain the system around 60%, because I know that it takes roughly 20% or so from total solar day to get to the point where you can reach morning. And so another 14 miles of driving, and we peaked at 77%, and then I added charge to the car until we were at 57%. And let's go ahead and see our notes. And again, the takeaway from here is that I'm just trying to operate it as an AI would, just trying to figure out, okay, how easy is it for a system to make these automatic decisions. And so then we'll bring up the 25th here, and in this case my ration was 15 kilowatt hours for the previous day, but March 25th the daily production was only 17 and a half, and so that made it impossible to get to that 60%. And so the solution there was to not charge the car. And so here's the notes for that day. And so again, the goal for our total solar day didn't get reached. And so then here is the 26th, and things are looking up. We managed to get a decent production today, 43.8 kilowatts. And then total home use was 24. And so then our notes section here, we made our 60%, so but we still don't really have enough overage to comfortably send to the car. And so we didn't charge the car at all. We let the system recover. And so then here we have the 27th. Drove another 13 miles, and this time we managed to get some recovery. And obviously now we're in a situation where we do actually need to replace some of the power that we've used from the vehicle. And so we went ahead and put 15 kilowatt hours there. And here's the notes section. 15 kilowatts to the vehicle. All the vehicle information there. Basically trying to leave it about where we left it. We added a little bit to it. So what we're banking on here is that we've made it through the worst patch, and now, can we expect some better production for the 29th? And so because of that, and here's the 28th. All right. So because of that, when we look at the 28th, if we see that there's going to be decent production on the 29th, do we risk it? Well, in this case, this is one of those situations where any kind of AI, any kind of program that's helping you out with this, these are the sections and those edge cases, that's where the systems are really going to struggle. And so our decision here was, yeah, go ahead and put some power into the vehicle. So we put another 15 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. And so here's the notes for the 28th. And so then still keeping a little bit of safety margin for driving, keeping a little over 100 miles of range on the car. Here's the 29th. And the 29th did not disappoint. It gave us a pretty good production, 53 kilowatt hours, and that allowed us to put some additional miles to the car, 12 kilowatt hours. And so then basically that gave us what we were hoping for, good production and a chance for putting some back in the car. And then we'll finish here with the notes for the 29th. And that's where we would normally end. But, as the infomercial says, but wait, there's more. So here's a little bonus. So we had one of our subscribers who wanted to see how long it would take to recover the vehicle after depleting it after a long drive. And so let's pull this thing up here. So Terry, this was this quick topic is just for you. And so let me pull up a clip here. Now this quick topic is based on a request from a subscriber, and he wanted to do a specific test. He thought it would be interesting to see if you did have an electric vehicle and you did have to do a trip where you depleted the battery, how long would it take to recover the car to a charged state where you would normally leave it? Now, when you see the next 2-week updates, I guarantee you that the wait is going to be worthwhile. We've been running for about 3 weeks now on what we like to call zombie apocalypse mode, with the grid completely disconnected. Now, granted, I don't do a lot of driving, 15, 20 miles a day with a couple of 50 to 80 mile days tossed in here and there throughout that period. But I have comfortably done all of my driving all off of sunlight. So I have a trip planned to Marin tomorrow, and that trip is going to require that I completely charge the car, something that I haven't really been doing for the last 2-3 weeks. I've been simply replacing what I've used and maybe plus a little bit, and then just happily running the home on everything. But again, that subscriber is now interested in saying, okay, well, in a realistic sense, what happens? And he brings up a good point. Realistically, I normally don't leave the car at 130 miles, 140 miles. I generally leave the car at 230 or so, which is about 90% charged. And so it brought up a good point. So let's start doing that then. And so today we've got, right now we're showing 56% a little over 50% on the charge state of the batteries themselves. That equates out roughly, it's a little over 80 kilowatt hours of usable power in the battery. So that equates to a little over 40 kilowatt hours of charge available to the system. Now, as we've already seen, we want to leave a little bit of a buffer for getting through the evening, and the percentage drop in the transitional period earlier had been about 20%. Well, as the days are getting longer and the angle of the sun is getting higher, we're getting more and more of a charge in the car. Yesterday, I believe we had 56 kilowatt hours of power put into the batteries, and it wasn't a terribly sunny day. Today is a terribly sunny day. And so the other point is that the reason I'm charging now is that because we're on zombie apocalypse mode and there is no way to send power to the grid or recoup, the system is in danger of actually shutting off at some point around 4 or so in the afternoon when this thing hits 100%. And so I feel confident I'm just going to go ahead and fully charge the car off of the grid now, or excuse me, off of the batteries now, and then in preparation for our trip tomorrow, what we normally do, or what I normally do when I'm going to go on a longer trip, is at some point in the morning, I'll program the car to then fully charge itself so that I get the maximum range from the house out of it before I would potentially have to charge. And then the subscriber wanted us to return and get home with 10% on the car. And I think I can come pretty close to that. And so what we're going to do is, I'm going to drive to Marin, and then I will give a bump charge in Marin to the point where I barely make it home. And that'll be somewhere between that 7 to 10% range. I may have to drive around a little bit so that we get it to that 10% range, once I get home. But that's where we'll start to charge the car, and then we'll see about answering his question about how long it takes to recover. So let's get charged. All right. Okay, so we just put 30 kilowatt hours into the car, and so that brings us to just under that 90% that I usually keep the car at. I stopped at 30 just to keep the number even. No particular other reason than that. So now in the morning, what we're going to do is, prior to setting off, I'm going to go ahead and set the car to automatically start charging probably somewhere around 4 or 5 in the morning, and then have it charged to 100%, and then I'll turn around and start my trip with 100% on the vehicle. That will minimize the amount of power that I'll need on that bump charge at the supercharger. And so we'll continue this when I'm on my way back. Might be an interesting eye-opener for folks that don't yet have electric vehicles, that want to see how this all kind of works, how electric vehicles kind of play into their day, and show us where we're at currently as far as electric vehicles go. This one has a 90 kilowatt hour battery. If I had a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack in this, probably wouldn't need the bump charge. Probably be able to go there, do what driving I need to do, and then turn around and come back and do all in one charge. But generally we don't pull our normal cars into a driveway empty. Of course, we don't have a fuel pump for our gasoline cars at home either. But I think that in the future, what this is going to show is that we do need a little more of a buffer. So I think an ideal size for a battery pack on a car like this would be probably somewhere around 160 to 200 kilowatt hour pack. That allows you to not have to keep it charged fully, and you can just decide what you need for your particular journey. But let's go ahead and end this here, and then we'll pick it up back at the supercharger when we're returning from Marin. All right, well, hopefully you can hear me okay. I don't have a lapel mic on right now, so speak up a little bit, see how we do. So here we are at the supercharger in Corte Madera. Now, normally what I would do on a return trip, I would charge the car so that I had 20 or 30% or so, maybe 40 left on the vehicle, depending on how close I was to home. And that way you're not arriving home with, loud? That way you're not arriving home with the vehicle mostly depleted. But in answer to one of our subscribers who was curious, if you do wind up coming home after a commute or something of that nature, how long would it take to restore the vehicle to something that you could be comfortable with as far as being able to drive, if it was saving for evening driving or that kind of a thing? And then once you do restore the car to full charge, how long does it take the system to recover? So the system, when we left, I had charged the car fully and we had depleted the system to 13%. Well, in looking at the amount of charge that we've put back into the system, and we're not quite done with the day yet, we're already at a little over 50%, almost 60%. And so again, on our system, it's about a little over 80 kilowatt hours usable, and so that means that we have about 40 kilowatt hours waiting for us at home. And so let's finish up this. We're going to put just enough charge in the car to barely make it home, hopefully somewhere between the 7 to 10% mark, like the subscriber was interested in seeing, and then we'll see how long it takes to recover. And so we'll pick us back up at the Energy Sovereignty Project. Okay, well, here we are back at the Energy Sovereignty Project. Long day of driving. A lot of fun with some friends I haven't seen in a while. So in total, about 250 miles or so. We'll get when we get back to the studio and go over this, we'll get some hard numbers off of the odometer and everything, but that's roughly what we did. So my apologies, I came as close as I could to 10%, it's around 11%. Drove around a little bit to try to knock it down to 10 before we got here, but it's late and I just wanted to get the car on the charger, so 11% is close enough to 10. Okay, so now what was requested was to see how long now it took to charge the car full to 90%. And then also, I'm assuming, he didn't mention this, but I'm assuming also to see how long the system takes to recover. Now, by recover this time of year, we're not looking to recover to 100%. We're actually looking for that 60% number, 60 or 70% number. Once you hit that number at this time of the year, you got to get rid of some of the charge. You're going to peak the system out and then either send power out to the grid, or the system will shut off if it's on zombie apocalypse mode. There's no place for the power to go. So I'll consider 60 or 70% to be reaching a nominal point. So now right now we're at 50%, and as you know from the system, and again when I got here it was a little over 50%, 54%, 55%, something like that, which is the charge that we had gotten throughout the day. 50% in this, the full system is a little over 80 kilowatt hours, so we're sitting right about for that 40 kilowatt hour range here as far as what's in the batteries right now. Now, when we first started this morning, all right, we were also, I'll have to refresh my numbers, we'll do that in the studio. I believe, again, it was around that 55, 56, maybe 58%, somewhere just under the 60% mark. I then put energy into the car, and that brought the total percentage for the batteries down to 13%. We had charged up at 4 in the morning. Again, when we get back to the studio, I'll pull up the chart, go over that, and show at what time the vehicle charged. I'll do a screenshot when I get done charging here, and we'll kind of take a look at that tomorrow. So now, one of the other things that we'll go into is that for the next 2 days, we are forecast to have 80% cloud cover and rain over the area. Now, this time of year, 80% cloud cover, it's going to wind up equating to somewhere between 30 and 40 kilowatt hours, depending on where the breaks in the weather occur. If they occur around midday or whatnot, we'll get a little higher. If we wind up with a lot of cloudy weather right at peak production, then it might be a little on the low side. But we'll see. We'll see. And so the goal for tonight is to deplete the system no more than 20%, because we know that that's still kind of a good benchmark number. We don't want to get into trouble tomorrow. We want to make sure that that we'll have enough to make it through the next 2 days. And so again, if we discharge to 20% now, then we know that we'll make it easily to the morning. And then tomorrow we'll be able to recoup a decent amount. We'll pull more than the home uses off of the grid. And then we may not be putting much of a charge in the car tomorrow, but we'll see. We'll see. Again, that's why we're doing this. Real world test, real world situation. The gentleman made some great points in his in what he was asking for in the request, because that represents normal driving. Now, again, once we do the closeouts for week 3 and week 4, and of course the month, we'll go over those numbers in greater detail, and you'll be able to see exactly how many miles and how those miles laid on each day as we examine that. And my driving is probably a little bit less than most people drive. The studio where I work, it's not very far from here, so you'll be able to kind of see how much driving I did and take a look at how much driving you do on a weekly basis and see how much of overlap goes. But it's still been quite interesting that this early in the year that I'm basically covering my driving. So with that, we'll just let the car charge. I'm going to go ahead and put 15 kilowatt hours on the car, and that should cover any driving that I need to do the remainder of tonight and tomorrow. And then we'll head over to the studio tomorrow and close this out with some hard numbers and update it as a quick topic. Get it uploaded for you guys. I know you've been real patient. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties with the rest of the closeout numbers. But all right, so let's let the vehicle finish, and then we'll head over to the studio. Well, Terry, I hate to do this to you, but you're going to have to wait a day or two to see how this all turns out. I promise you it'll be worth it, and at least I know I'll have one subscriber on the hook for seeing how this all turns out. One thing I'd like to point out about the supercharging is that, as it turns out, when I took a look at the navigation computer after I had arrived at the supercharger, it seemed that it was telling me that I should be able to make it back. And so I have a couple more trips planned to Sausalito and Marin, and so let's take a look and see how that goes. Hopefully we'll be able to make it back and forth without supercharging. That'd be kind of interesting. And that about closes out this month. I hope you had fun watching us put some sunlight on the roof and convert it straight to miles on the road. That was a lot of fun. More to follow on that. That's been very interesting to do. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Energy Sovereignty Project. I want to thank all those who subscribed and all those who hung with us here through our little delay after that hard drive crash. And I wish you all good luck with your own systems, and we'll see you next time.